Welcome back or welcome to Conscious Sunrise. I'm your host, John, and today I'm showing up exactly as I am, and that is tired, sore, and quite a bit lost in my life at the moment because I am currently navigating the dark night of the soul, which can be considered the most challenging, stretching, perplexing, painful, scary, frustrating, and discouraging part of the entire spiritual awakening journey. And I was going to wait until this was over and until I'd come out on the other side. And I was going to wait until all of my insights had perfectly crystallized in a nice package for me to offer you. But as the days pass, I'm not quite sure when this is going to end. And despite my experience and my thoughts being incomplete and at times incoherent, I still feel like there is medicine in what I am going to be sharing with you today, so that if you are currently going through your own dark night of the soul, or if you are going to be going through this in the future, that you can feel much, much less alone, knowing that I have been through this and I have walked through the depths of my own underworld um, and survived to tell the tale. And so, what I'm going to be sharing in this episode is really just my basic understanding of the dark night of the soul and what it is. I'm going to be talking about the things that have really helped me work my way through this. I'm going to be sharing the things that have definitely not helped me at all so that you can avoid doing those things as well. And then I'll just wrap up with some general perspectives and insights that I've gathered along the way that I find are worth sharing with you. So, with that said, I'd like to dive right in and start with a quote from Hazrat Khan, who says, "There can be no rebirth without a dark night of the soul, a total annihilation of all that you believed in and thought that you were." And so that is currently what I'm undergoing, a complete annihilation of my ego and all of these things that I thought I was. I'm now realizing that I'm not. And so the last couple months for me that I've been in this dark night of the soul, I've been having these profound realizations that, I guess I'm not the person that needs to remain at the mercy of my scarcity wounds for the rest of my life. Or, I guess I'm not the person that needs to hold everything together for everyone else all the time in fear of abandonment. Or, I guess I'm not that loser that I thought I was when I had zero self worth. And so, as you can imagine, the ego is having a very tough time releasing its grip from these patterns and beliefs that have really woven themselves into the fabric of my very being. The ego is trying its very best right now to cling and to grasp to those old familiar patterns, despite how harmful and non-helpful they were. And really, there's this other higher consciousness that's saying, yo, like, you got to let go. There's something else over here. And so this is kind of the battle that I am currently locked in. Now, let's get into how I feel on a daily basis right now, because I feel like that's definitely worth sharing. And I feel very lonely. I feel very disconnected from everything, from my intuition, from my higher self, from the universe, from my guides, my angels, and ancestors. I mean, I feel completely on my own island right now, which is not how this journey has gone for me to this point. To this point, I've always had the ability to kind of tap into my higher self or to listen to my intuition or to see signs and synchronicities from my guides and angels and stuff like this. But I have a complete spiritual disconnect, I guess you could call it, at the moment. Over the last couple months, I have felt like a passenger in the sidecar of my own life. So some days I have literally needed to take in it hour by hour, or I just need to get through the morning until lunch, and then I'll take it from lunch until late afternoon, and then I'll take it from late afternoon to dinner, and really taking it moment by moment. And other days, I've had glimpses of hope and a bit more of those expansive type feelings. and feeling more at ease. But really, most days over the last couple months for me have been extremely challenging, which is why about 2 months have gone by also since I've put out a podcast episode, which I feel very bad about. But it was an extremely challenging period for me, and it still is. And I'm not anywhere close to being 100% or healed or anything like that. I am just in the thick of this dark night of the soul, and I am just trying to live through it the best that I can. It's a very spiritual like depression, which is different than a medically based depression, which you could treat with talk therapy and prescription medications. It's a spiritual depression, and I think that these spiritual depressions can happen at two different points, and they can kind of be the catalyst toward your spiritual awakening. So if you're in a job or a situation that you're really just not enjoying and you consider yourself depressed, that can be the catalyst into your spiritual awakening. But if you're already on your spiritual journey, this spiritual depression can be kind of a deepening of your journey. But as I said, I feel just completely abandoned by the divine, by my higher self, my ancestors, and I feel just very alone and in the dark right now. I've been very tired lately. I've been very emotional lately, and I never considered myself an emotional person. I have felt very anxious and fearful, and scarcity wounds have come up, self worth wounds have come up, abandonment wounds have come up. All of these things that really trace back to my childhood that I am now in the process of purging out of my system and getting rid of all those old, outdated beliefs and patterns and frequencies that are really clogging my energy so I can make room for new energies to come into my vessel. I've mentioned this before, but when there is a major upgrade happening, like there is for me right now, that is my genuine belief. This has been a very physical journey for me in particular. And so I know that you have your own constellation of wounds and beliefs and patterns that have melded you into where you are today. And I have my own unique constellation of experiences and things that have made me into the person I am today. So I don't know if this is the case for everyone, but I can say without a doubt that I have never would have believed the amount of physicality that accompanies these releases and these purges from my system. Um, I have had severe jaw tightness and tension headaches for most of my life, and those have really come back with a vengeance for me. And so it's hard to really not get lost in these symptoms or not get lost in these releases from your nervous system, because what I experienced is what I can only equate to a spiritual flu like symptoms after these major realizations around self worth, abandonment, and scarcity, which have really been my last several months on this journey, where these major triggers have been coming up at an accelerated rate, I guess you could say. But the physical releases from these realizations have been weeks on end of feeling like I have run a marathon or lifted thousands of pounds of weights. It's a head to toe thing. Like I said, it's very flu like in its symptoms, and I just never anticipated these kinds of things. So I'm still dealing with now, even as I record this podcast, these symptoms. And so, like I said, I just apologize if I'm not fully on point because my head has felt like it's going to explode for weeks now. But I just decided that enough's enough and I need to get back into the things that I feel passionate about, and helping other people on their path is something I'm very passionate about. So, first, I would like to start with things that didn't help at all. Um, so I want to tell you about all the different ways that I made this harder than it needed to be by creating unnecessary resistance in my journey. Through my experience thus far, one of the major realizations that I've learned about a healing journey or a spiritual awakening journey or anything personal growth related is that a lot of this, like a real lot of this, is about creating safety in your nervous system so that it can be in a regulated state. Because when you are in a regulated state and your nervous system is not activated and hypervigilant and scanning for the next threat, when it feels settled and at ease, that is when all this old rubbish that is stored in the tissues and the cells of your body are able to be released, and where things are really able to be felt in a way that they need to be felt so that they can leave your system for good. So, a lot of what I have learned, like I said, and I will get to it later in this podcast about things that have helped, but a lot of this is about creating safety in your nervous system. And the reason that I say that is that when you are in a state of resistance and you're doing things that I'm going to be discussing now that I did and that I still find myself doing from time to time, are just so not helpful and not signaling to your nervous system that things are okay to process and things are okay for more layers to be shed and brought up. And so when I started the descent down into my own underworld, I was really resisting it like the Black Plague. I also felt like I may have been the only person in the history of the human race that was going through this. So I was feverishly researching for podcasts, for articles, for information, for sacred teachings that could somehow signal to me that someone had been through this before and not just gone through the dark night, but gone through this flavor of the dark night where these major triggers and wounds that have been with me for decades are coming up over the course of months, like back to back to back at an accelerated rate. As I said, the just the sense of disconnection from everything, the physical sensations and the deep pain that I felt physically, I needed to somehow intellectualize that this is real and that people have been through this before. And so, me spending hours on end and days on end and weeks on end listening to podcasts and searching for articles and teachings and mystics that have talked about this version of the Dark Night of the Soul created a whole lot of resistance for my system that really just poked and prodded at a wound that was trying to heal. And I just made things worse and worse. And so, my advice to you is do not do what I did. Do not spend any of your time researching if this is a real thing, because this is a real thing. And I'm going through it, and many others have gone through it based on the research that I was able to find. So, I did it out of a sense of trying to make myself feel more at ease going through this. But like I said, nothing about this signaled to my nervous system that things were okay. I was in panic mode just trying to find answers, and you should definitely avoid that. Trying to fix it or figure it out is once again just spending more mental energy on something that is making it actively worse. So I repeat that. Even though you come into this with the best intentions of trying to develop a strategy that can help you through this or trying to fix this or heal this on your own. I understand that you come at that with the best intentions, like I come at it on a daily basis with good intentions, but really, trying to intellectualize it is just pushing that destination further away of being on the other side of the dark night of the soul. And so I had to realize that this really is the work of the body. And I've been living in my head for who knows how long, that this is about turning the brain off and re-entering the body and really listening to what the body says. But this isn't work of the brain to fix something. This is the work of your body to have the time, space, and compassion to work these things out at its own pace. And I needed to learn the hard way that I need to respect that pace. And I'm not the one setting timelines or rushing through this. It needs to just play out the way it's going to play out. Something else that didn't work that I had good intentions around was doing a lot of grounding during this time. And so my grounding practices consist of things like yin yoga and breath, writing in my journal, walking outside barefoot or just going for walks not barefoot. Whatever helps me connect to the earth more. And so days where I was really wound up and not feeling great, I would go into these grounding activities with a goal. So, for instance, I would do yoga and I would do an hour long practice. And immediately after I come out of Shavasana, I am assessing, did that work? Do I feel better? Oh, I don't feel better. Oh, that didn't work. That was a waste of time. That was another waste of time. And it's like, that is never going to help. You need to approach grounding with love and kindness and compassion for your body, not another thing where you need to measure and fix and control the process. And like I said, this is still something I'm struggling with. But at the beginning of this dark night, I made things infinitely worse by going into these grounding practices and these self care practices with a goal in mind of I couldn't just journal, I had to journal to successfully process this new. So anyway, try avoiding doing those things with a goal and an intention. The only intention and goal that you should have is to be with your body and to give it the love and kindness that it deserves. Distractions, certainly not helpful. Whether you're going through a dark night of the soul or not, doesn't really matter, but the entertainment, the food, the picking up more hours at work, the cleaning the house for the fourth time that week, these are all just distractions that are preventing the inner work from happening. And so, um, I've been aware of the negative impact of distractions for a while, um, that I've been on this journey, probably for at least a couple years, where I've never really used social media that much because I don't think it's good for you, um, to be constantly comparing yourself to other people when you're on a personal growth journey. But I would find myself after a particularly hard day distracting myself, which is fine because the other thing I realized is that, like, you don't need to do this 24/7. Like, this doesn't have to be your life all the time. And if I wanted to watch a podcast on my TV or something, just striking the balance between allowing it from time to time, but not making that my default mode where I'm coming home from work and just distracting myself as much as possible. Because that is never going to allow you to get through this dark night. It's never going to allow you to heal those wounds that you're trying to heal. And I just don't recommend it. I find it infinitely more interesting to just be with the experience of yourself and what you're going through and to experience it fully. Another thing I caught myself doing is being really mean to myself at times. And so, I would wake up after feeling like I hadn't slept. And just first thought of the entire day is, I can't believe I feel like this again for another day. Or you can't do anything right. Or you're never going to heal. As the days pass, these things become more and more loud in your head, but they're not true. And what you need to be doing right now is having a lot of compassion, which I will talk about later. But being mean to yourself, I know it's kind of like a cliche thing, like to talk to yourself like you would talk to someone else that's going through something tough. But if you actually integrate that advice through difficult times instead of just intellectually realizing it, really makes a world of difference. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but forcing the timeline, um, which this directly ties back to my wounds of scarcity and abandonment and self-worth, about me always feeling like I need to maximize every moment and control everything, so that hopefully things go in my favor. Um, but I had a lot of resistance that I was creating around where I should be in this process, how this should be over by now, how I should be feeling better at this point because it's been long enough. I mean, the more that you dwell in this victim mentality, I mean, let's just call it what it is. The more that I found myself dwelling in that, I knew that I was just getting myself more and more wound up and more sucked into the idea that I was never going to get through this. So that's another thing I don't recommend. The more that you poke and prod and make it something different than it needs to be or what you think it should be or what it should look like or how you should feel, you're making it infinitely worse than it needs to be. And you're really just scratching and clawing and resisting because I was doing this a lot. And then at some point, I just let go and you go down to the bottom and you meet yourself in your own underworld and you don't realize that there's a springboard at the bottom at the time, but there is a springboard. And so, with that said, I now want to talk about the things that actually did help me through this journey. Letting go of resistance of everything I've just discussed is literally everything. Everything I just talked about, everything that your better judgment is probably going to point you towards about how you're not doing enough and how you should be doing more and how who cares if you didn't sleep or who care or you're going to be meeting all sorts of resistance if you start listening to those voices inside about what you should be doing. And so letting go of that is literally everything. Eliminating the distractions. You know what happens when you do that? It really allows you to sit with your feelings and allow them to rise up naturally. And so I've tried this. Instead of coming home from work and putting the TV on, I come home from work and I sit on this very couch and I just breathe and I allow the things to come up. That's it. I don't have to fix them. I don't have to intellectualize them. I don't have to figure them out. I just have to allow them to come up and to be felt so that they can leave. I think I've heard that it really only takes about 90 seconds for an emotion to be felt. And so a lot of times when we're out and something happens and we don't have that 90 seconds to feel, that's when things get trapped. But really, these things, as they come up, it's 90 seconds here, 90 seconds there, and you're just releasing all this baggage. But when you're distracted, you're just bouncing from one thing to another when all your nervous system wants to do is release this stuff. So, this is something that I really struggle to understand. I was trying to take my mind off of sitting with myself and doing the hard inner work, which is hard, but it's also not hard to just sit undistracted and allow yourself to feel uncomfortable things, to become like a third party that's just allowing these things to pass through you instead of pushing them down even longer. I've said it before, but if you keep pushing things down, you're just going to make a giant pile under the rug that's going to be there for life. So that doesn't really interest me. So that's why sitting with yourself, as simple and as passive as that may sound, because you think you should be doing stuff like I thought, the less you do and the more you just sit with yourself, you're going to start to do the inner work that you've heard about. Having lots of compassion for myself helped a lot instead of getting mad at myself, like I just told you about. Just being really gentle with myself, which I don't think we are gentle with ourselves most of the time. Because when I started actively paying attention to this, I I was blown away by how just mean I am to myself over stupid things about running a few minutes late or about overcooking something for 30 seconds more than it should have been cooked and just beating myself down over that stuff. It doesn't help. This is a big one. Surrendering to how you're feeling without needing to fix it, analyze it, or wondering when you'll feel better. So it's really just like waking up and feeling bad and just being like, wow, that's interesting. I feel bad. Let me be with this today. Oh, my jaw's really tight and my head feels like it's going to spontaneously combust at any moment. Hmm, that's interesting. Let me just be with it. I mean, when you actually are with your suffering and surrender to it, it completely changes it. It's not something you're pushing against. It's not something you're taking a bunch of um, pain medications for. And that's something I'm really proud of. Like, I haven't even taken an ibuprofen over the last couple months because that's how committed I am to being with my suffering, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, or otherwise. Um, but just try this. When you're having a tough day, just be like, I feel like crap. And that's okay. It's okay. It's okay to feel like that. You don't have to get out of it. And if you try to get out of it, you're just going to have to deal with it at another point. So, anyway, that was a big thing for me. Instead of me trying to get to the bottom of why I feel like this still, just surrendering to it really helped me reach those expansive states that I was in, those small windows, a bit quicker. Moving slower. Huge thing that I struggle with, as someone that has always been focused on needing to prove my worth and optimize and all these unhelpful coping mechanisms I've lived with, perfectionism and feeling like I'm not making the most of every moment. Moving slower has been a game changer. And so, over the last several weeks, I made a conscious effort to not rush anywhere. Because once again, rushing is signaling to your nervous system that there's a threat. And once again, it just keeps you activated and in a tizzy. And it's not going to help you get out of this dark night any sooner than you need to. So, moving slower, ways that I do this when I'm driving, I'll take my hat off and I'll just put it over the clock in the car. So I don't know what time it is when I'm driving to work. If I show up a few minutes late, oh well, I did my best to get there on time, like I do every day. Um, but having that just constant stress of always peeking over at the clock, simple things like that, really just walking and moving slowly, even in the kitchen, just grabbing things, just moving slowly really makes the world of difference. Turning toward the discomfort rather than running. I've talked about this, sitting with your feelings, but really lean into them and be curious about them. Like, they're not going to bite you. They're not going to physically harm you. It's not like, it's not anything like that. These are just things that have been suppressed for a long, long, long time that have probably shown up in physical manifestations like shoulder pain or back pain or IBS or all sorts of different skin conditions. I mean, these things can manifest a lot, and really, it's just these trapped feelings that want to be felt. And so, like I said, at first, I was not turning in and leaning into them, but once I started doing that, I mean, I actually enjoy sitting with the discomfort and just allowing it to come up because I know that there's nothing I need to do except feel into it. I don't need a strategy. I don't need a plan. I don't need any sort of way to figure it out. I just literally need to sit and experience it. Complete game changer. Learning the gentleness of breath and presence. Presence has been huge. Now, I know that's probably a buzzword or whatever, but presence has been huge for me to get reintroduced to over these last few months. I mean, always thought that I was a pretty present person and someone that can go on a walk and really enjoy the smell of the flowers and all the sights and sounds and nature. Like, I've always felt like a present person, but this has been a whole other level of presence. As I said, I've been just completely disconnected from my higher self, the divine, and anything beyond myself. So it's really just been a me alone. And this whole moving slower and with presence has been very grounding and has just really helped me move through this and get out of my head and into my body. And so just really just these monotonous things that you do on a daily basis that seem very unremarkable, just looking at them with a new set of eyes and a new awareness around what they are and experiencing them through that deepened level of presence has been a huge thing for me. Really huge. Because once again, even though I'm disconnected from anything higher than myself, without presence and breath and compassion and all that, my mind would be in a tornado of anxiety and fear and stress, and hope is gone and it's over. And so presence has been huge. This is also about timing, but really just releasing and letting go of the fantasy of arriving or healing on a specific timeline and really just simply being with what is. There were times where I was like just so ready for this to be over. But the thing is that these things don't happen on your time. They happen on spiritual time. So this is something I'm still trying to understand as I'm going through this because it's extremely difficult. But any sort of timeline or when you think you should be healed by, you need to just really surrender that and let go of it because it's just going to hold you back from getting there. As I said, grounding practices help a lot. Lots of water, lots of high vibrational foods, lots of self-care. These are the things that are going to anchor you when you're going through this dark night of the soul and you don't know which way is up or down. I've done lots of crying over the last couple months. And for someone that has never cried, really, and that was actively told to stop crying as a kid or to not come down from my room until I had a smile on my face, it's been crazy to cry. I'm not going to lie. As I said, I've been in just a very heightened emotional state because once these layers start pulling back, they just keep coming. And with that comes all those emotions that want to be felt. Some days I've just cried for no reason. I've just felt it coming up and wanting to come out, and then the tears just come. But there's also been a couple times where I've had profound, primal releases of tears that have almost been comical by how intense they've been. Like I would be wailing and then laughing and then wailing, and there'd be snots coming out of my nose and all sorts of fun stuff like that. But crying helps so much. I can't even begin to describe how helpful it is. And I know that you probably live in a culture much like I do, where we're actively told to not cry and toughen up and all this stuff. But that's how you find yourself completely miserable. So I'm changing my relationship with emotional release, like crying. And like I said, those times where it's just come out, I have felt like I've dropped 30 spiritual pounds after those sorts of releases. And so I just encourage you to not hold it in if it wants out. And I really believe better out than in, you know, much like Shrek used to say. Doing the self care without having a goal in mind is what you need to be doing. So if you're stretching, just stretch to just be with your muscles in your body, not to fix how your back feels. Or if you're journaling, just do it to get all your thoughts out on paper, not to perfectly articulate this latest experience that you went through. Things like that. I also keep reminding myself that my soul chose this before coming here and that this is all part of the curriculum that I need to go through for my soul's ascension. And that I'm never going to be given anything on this journey that I cannot handle, no matter how challenging and intense and stretched I feel at times. I'm never going to be given anything that I cannot handle or that I won't come back from. And so having these things in mind when things are really tough, knowing that this is all part of a larger plan and that your soul actively chose this exact situation and journey and path, and that you're exactly where you're supposed to be every day of this dark night of the soul, really helps lighten the load on all this stuff. So I encourage you when you're going through this to really be curious about everything, about the things you're feeling, about the triggers that came up for you, about the wounds that have resurfaced, about the physical tension that you're feeling, about the situations that you find yourself in. When you adopt a mindset of curiosity about going deeper into what you're experiencing, I've just found it infinitely helpful to get through this. And so now I just want to share with you some general reflections that I've had through this journey and things that I've journaled about. My first reflection is that as humans, we are meant to be free. We're not meant to be imprisoned by these false beliefs and these patterns that we've picked up along the way in order to try to remain safe in a world that we have found to be unsafe throughout our lives. And really, we are meant to enjoy the fullness of life and recognize our brilliance and radiance of our life. This is a purge. That's what the Dark Knight is. It's purging old frequencies, it's purging outdated belief systems and patterns. And if you're familiar with purges, I don't know if you've ever done a juice cleanse, but purges don't always feel great. And they usually feel pretty bad when you're removing all these toxins from your system. But really, it's just signaling that your soul is ready for the next leg of the journey. And everything that's not aligned with where your soul's going has got to go, has got to be purged from the system. And so that's why I find myself having these intense physical and emotional reactions throughout this dark night of the soul, because we're just letting go of lots of things that are not coming with the next version of myself or with yourself, because they just can't come. I've also realized that, like, you do some work and you think you're ready for the next level, right? This was certainly the case for me. And then the universe will come in with some tough love and say, "You think you're ready? Well, you missed this. You missed this. You weren't even thinking about this over here, which is still influencing your thoughts, actions, and everything about you." And so it comes in with some tough love and it knocks you down. And that's what happened to me going through this dark night of the soul. I thought I was so ready for the next level. Like, I'm ready. Like, let's go. And I was so just not ready. There was so much more work that needed to be done. And I was certainly humbled by the universe, and I still am on a daily basis. But it really was just my soul wanting to crank the heat up a little bit more and to just burn off more of these old unhelpful things and get back to the core of who I actually am as a person before I learned all this unhelpful stuff about myself. As your nervous system gets more comfortable, more layers are going to shed. More and more layers are going to shed. And it's really not uncommon that after feeling great, even for a few days, like I did, that you're going to get pulled back into a state of contraction. And this is completely normal, even though it's super discouraging to be like, wait, I was just feeling pretty good after going through a stretch of feeling terrible. And now the floor has dropped out yet again. And here I am feeling terrible and questioning my entire existence again. This is normal. Okay? I wanna normalize this for you because this is something I really struggled with, but, um, it's just because your system is feeling more and more comfortable with the conditions that you're creating that it is releasing more and more. And with all this said, I don't think it's going to be intense, like, these expansions and contractions are going to be intense like this for the rest of my life. I just think that this foundational base work that is being done around these very deep core primal wounds in me getting my first exposure to these. I think that's why my ego is having a meltdown and why these reactions have been so intense. But I do not anticipate them being like this for the rest of my journey. And so I don't want to scare you and make you think that if you are going through something intense, that that can be expected for the rest of your life. Because I genuinely don't believe that. I do want to speak to the intelligence of the nervous system because I tried overriding it with my I know what's best type attitude. And the nervous system is so infinitely more intelligent than any thought, strategy, idea, anything that I would ever come up with to get through this. Um, it knows exactly what it's doing. And really, we just need to get out of the way. It knows what layer needs to be released first. And then it knows what layer needs to come after that. And then once you've done some work on that and you've been compassionate with yourself and whatever, then it knows that you're ready to go through this one next, which is going to hurt. But the tools and the resilience that you've built by working through these other layers prepared you for this other layer that just showed up. So I just want to repeat that the nervous system is infinitely smart, and it knows exactly the order and the timing that these things need to be released and how they need to be released and felt. It knows all of this. It's just about you creating the right conditions for your nervous system to be able to feel that safety so that it can release these things and that you can move on from them finally. Um, but you're really just teaching your body and your nervous system through all of this that it can be with difficult emotions. And that is going to help you so much that I can't even put into words. That putting faith into your nervous system really is one of the keys to successfully navigating this dark night of the soul and to purging all these things out of your system. I think people on the spiritual path, and this is myself included, of course, want to get through this as quickly as possible. And at points, I was feeling victimized by the intensity of this and how I never asked for this and why is this happening to me? And I really started identifying with my dark night or with the depression, the spiritual depression that comes with it. And I wanted someone to like swoop down and rescue me. But really, all of those things would have been spiritual bypassing. And they wouldn't have allowed me to be present with my suffering in the way that I needed to be present with it, in order to successfully eradicate it from my system. And so, like I said, if you find yourself in a victim mindset or you want to expedite the timeline and make things go quicker, just know that these are forms of spiritual bypassing, right? And so that's not healing. That's that's going around the hard work that needs to take place. And so you're only going to be hurting yourself more by doing that. And I found that out the hard way. The healing that I sought ended up being a lot quieter, slower, and sometimes much more passive than I trusted at first. And I still have a hard time trusting this because, like I said, I am a fiery person. I'm an Aries, and I really have always been about plowing forward and making things happen and just working harder and harder and longer and longer. And so when I'm presented with a situation like this, Dark Night of the Soul, I naturally want to develop strategies and research and figure it out. But I needed to realize that, like I said, this is going to be a much more passive healing than I would like. And I need to be okay with that, which is going to go against everything you know about yourself and everything that society tells you about what is productive. Being productive when you're healing on the spiritual path is extremely passive, is extremely hands off, is extremely slow, and is quiet. I really did think at points that I'd lost all of my progress from my journey and went back to square one. And this has been a recurring theme over my journey. But this Dark Night of the Soul was like, I really, in my bones, believed that, well, I just lost my 2 years of being on this path, and I lost all the insights, and I lost my understanding of who I thought I was becoming because I don't know anything about anything. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know how to connect with my intuition or my creativity or anything higher than myself. And I really genuinely believe that I lost all that progress. But what is happening and what needed to happen is a clearing of the system. And it really, I believe this is that it's just getting you ready to have another breakthrough in your life. But this is a final purge. And so I hope that you can take solace in that. And also, something that is 100% worth mentioning and very important is the integration side of all of this. So it is a moment by moment, day by day practice for me. And so just yesterday, I caught myself where 6 months ago, I was in a situation where I would have been very triggered by these sorts of dynamics in the workplace. And yesterday, a very similar situation happened, and I had such a non-reaction and was not triggered by it whatsoever because I now realize these things around self-worth and abandonment, and I don't feel the need to have to prove my value, right? And so it's just interesting that you catch yourself like, "Oh, I was about to people please right there, and I'm not going to do that because that's not me anymore." Or, "Oh, I was trying to really maintain control over this thing that cannot be controlled, and I should probably just let that go." And so the integration of these insights has really been happening, and it's really cool to see it when it happens, where it's like, it's not like I walk around with a game plan of like, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. I'm meeting these new situations with completely new awareness, and I'm not thinking about it. And that to me proves that this rewiring in my nervous system is actually taking place. With all this said, I still have no idea how long this is going to last. I still have no idea how I'm going to feel on a daily basis. And really, all I can do is surrender into not knowing these things. I have no idea when my higher spiritual faculties will ever come back online or if they ever will. Like I said, I've been feeling so alone and isolated and unable to connect to myself. I just would like to know, but I don't know these things. I don't know what is going to come out of this, but I do know that I'm leaving a lot of the old parts of me behind. And while the new has not fully emerged yet, and I'm kind of in this middle place where there's nothing to really grasp onto, I know that that new version of myself is waiting on the other side of this, and that's really what keeps me going every day. We just talked about integration, but as I said, I still don't integrate perfectly in every opportunity that I'm presented with, because all of this has been happening very quickly. But things are definitely improving, and I am catching myself where I would get triggered before, not being triggered whatsoever or as much. And really, I'm just living in a very fluid state right now. I don't know what each day is going to bring, but I'm really just surrendering to this. And I know that eventually it is going to pass. And so, with that said, that's who I am. That's where I'm at. And hopefully, what I just shared can help you going through your own dark night. I really believe that what I just shared and talked about can serve as medicine for you. Perhaps you're having a completely different experience of the dark night. And if that is the case, and even if it is not, I would love to hear from you if anything I discussed resonated with you, or if you have something that really helped you that I didn't mention. I'm looking for new things, even though I shouldn't be, as you know. I'm looking for new things on a daily basis about how to more successfully work through this. And so I'm sure that I don't know everything about this. I know that for a fact that I don't know everything about this. And so I would really just appreciate if you're able to share anything that's helped you with me. And you can drop that in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed yet, maybe consider subscribing because I am going to be much more consistent with posting. I'm over the fear of having myself perfectly packaged and all that. I just have so few, you know what, left to give at this point that I just find it important for me to be sharing these words with you as they come to me and as I document my journey in real time. And so, with that said, I am John. I appreciate you sticking with me through this episode. And until next time, be well, and I will see you in the next one.